going to talk about the Irish pharmaceutical situation now. We touched on this in the news there on Friday. Patients are suffering because of cutbacks introduced last summer in the community pharmacy sector. Now, that's according to research carried out by the Irish Pharmacy Union, the IPU, and they say that the sector has already shed 1,600 jobs in the last 9 months. Well, to tell us more about how bad the situation is or how serious things are is the newly elected president of the IPU, that's Darragh O'Loughlin. Darragh, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
What are people facing who are involved in this sector, Darragh? How serious are things at the minute?
Well, as a result of the cuts that were imposed last summer, PwC, or PricewaterhouseCoopers, has calculated that 1,600 jobs have been lost in pharmacies across the country, of which about 300 were pharmacists and the other 1,300 were support staff. So obviously a reduction in staff size of that magnitude means that a lot of pharmacies are not in a position to provide the same level of service that they have once have provided. Pharmacies are providing a lot of free services like monitored dose dispensing for elderly patients, health screening, diabetes screening, blood pressure testing and so on. And they were doing this without charge just to assist their patients in watching their own health and monitoring their own health. And in many cases, due to staff shortages and much reduced income, they're just simply not in a position to provide those services anymore.
And when you look at the amount of jobs that are going, like when you hear the likes of 1,600 jobs in the last 9 months going, that's very, very serious indeed.
It is. That equates to approximately 10% of all of the staff that were working in pharmacies. PricewaterhouseCoopers had surveyed pharmacies a couple of years ago just to assess the level of employment in the sector, and then when they surveyed it again at the beginning of this year, they could see we've gone from approximately 16,000 people working in pharmacies to 10% below that, so 1,600 jobs. If it all happened in the one location, it should make news headlines, but because it's scattered across hundreds of small businesses, it has gone below the radar.
And what happens now, Darragh? What turn do you take? What's the answer to all this? Where do people stand?
Well, pharmacies have had to implement these cost cuts simply to stay in business. It's absolutely clear, 1,600 jobs have already gone, that there's no scope for cutting any further in pharmacies. They have all cut to the bone in an effort to stay viable and to stay competitive. And at this stage, we need to start looking more positively and proactively at the sort of services that pharmacies could be providing if they were supported by the HSE and by the Department of Health in providing them. And I'm not talking about wildly imaginative stuff. These are services that pharmacies in other countries are supported in providing, whether it's minor ailments schemes, as in Scotland, or medicine use reviews, which ensures cost-effective and safe use of medicines by patients, where the pharmacist is actually working with the department and with the HSE to try and increase the efficiency or the cost effectiveness of drug prescribing without impacting on patients. That would probably negate the need for this 50-cent charge that the Minister wants to put on medical card prescriptions, which we think is a retrograde step, and it could lead to people not taking medication that they need.
And can you see the Minister taking any appropriate steps in this, or is it a lost cause?
Well, the Minister for Pharmacy AGM over the weekend, we heard from pharmacist after pharmacist not be in a position to pay this charge. Patients who have difficulty managing their medication lead to people stopping taking their medication, whether it's for diabetes, whether it's for asthma, or more particularly for psychiatric conditions. People with mental health problems, people with addiction problems are the most likely to stop taking their medication. And this obviously is very expensive health treatments down the line. So it's a short-term quick fix which is likely to cause more problems than it solves.
Now, you've just come into this job. You've just more or less taken president of the Irish Pharmacy Union, and you've got to deal with this.
Yes, it's a difficulty for pharmacists because it's causing difficulty for our patients, and we have to see them through this. Sure, the patients get looked after, despite the fact that at times it can feel like we're the only ones, and introduction of charges that we're seeing from the HSE and from the government. And what we want to say is that there are more positive, proactive, imaginative ways of going about this that are good for patients, good for the public at large, and good for the state that has to pay for their health.
And briefly, what would you say to people this morning? People who are, I suppose, who are in figure, people who are in the community pharmacy sector, and when you say that they do that at all, where do they stand? Have they any hope at all?
Well, we're working with some officials in the HSE, it must be said, on medicine use reviews, on sitting down effects they might be suffering from, identify medications maybe that they don't need anymore. And we think that by doing this, that we will prove that people are taking their medications, that this is likely to save more money than introducing a 50-cent charge that could stop it. So introductions of charges and taxes like this does result in a dedication. Their doctors are prescribing medication that they need.
So it's doctors who are the ones who are
We know the patient's health condition and we know their medication, we know why they're taking it. It's not up to any...
that it's always the patients that are the priority, but it's not just the patient, it's also the people in very, very much affected, like the employees themselves.
That's right. The employees
and we tend to forget that.
Have taken a very, very serious... many of the employees that remain have had their salaries reduced and their payments reduced. 94% of those working in pharmacies have had their payroll reduced at this stage. So people have lost jobs, they've had their hours cut and they've had their pay cut. They have the same problems that other people have, and they're simply not in a position to take anymore. They're suffering all over the place, but our people are suffering too.
So our people are suffering too, so there's no winners in this. And you think is it like the pension situation with Morgan and Quinn? You think it's unlikely that the Minister or the government will step in on this one?
Well, I'm not in a position to that they made last year were very severe cuts. They certainly need to recognise there is no scope for, as we can, to get maximum benefit for what we're spending. There's no scope for cutting any further.
That one, no scope for cutting any further. Darragh O'Loughlin, President of the IPU, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So